The fifth blade is facing the wrong way. Clara Hayes said it softly, but the empty ceremonial hall carried the words farther than she intended. Morning light entered through the high stained glass windows of Blackwood Keep, laying strips of blue and silver across the stone floor. Servants moved between the pillars with folded banners, polished cups, and bowls of white winter roses. The ceremony of 5 territories would begin before noon. Nothing was permitted to be wrong. Clara stood before the weapon display with a linen cloth in one hand. 5 ceremonial blades rested upon the black oak frame. Each represented one of the territories sworn to protect the Blackwood throne. By tradition, every blade faced outward, away from the king, its dull edge turned toward the walls. The fifth pointed directly toward the throne. Clara glanced around. No one watched her. That was normal. She had worked inside the keep for 3 years and had learned that a good maid existed mostly through the absence of mistakes. Fires remained lit. Cloaks appeared when requested. Dust vanished before noble eyes could find it. The hands did the work. The woman attached to them was forgotten. Clara reached for the fifth blade and turned it outward. The metal felt wrong beneath the cloth. Too smooth. Too sharp. She pressed her thumb lightly near the edge without touching it. A thin curl of linen separated from the cloth and floated toward the floor. Her breath slowed. Ceremonial blades were never sharpened. They were symbols, not weapons. Clara. The head steward's voice struck from behind her. She lowered the blade at once. Mrs. Whitmore approached with a ring of keys at her waist and displeasure already arranged across her face. The banners in the western arch are uneven. I will correct them. And the king's cloak has not been brought from the council chamber. I will bring it. Mrs. Whitmore looked toward the weapon display. Have you finished polishing those? Yes. Clara did not mention the sharpened edge. Not yet. A maid did not accuse anyone based on a piece of cut linen. She collected proof quietly, or she became the problem everyone remembered. She left the hall to retrieve the cloak. When she returned less than 5 minutes later, the fifth blade had been turned again. Inward, toward the throne. Clara stopped beneath the archway. A man stood beside the display. He wore the silver and white uniform of a ceremonial bearer, though Clara had never seen him among the palace staff. He was tall, clean-shaven, and still in the way trained fighters became still when listening for movement behind them. His hand rested near the sharpened blade, not upon the handle, close enough to reach it quickly. Clara approached with the folded royal cloak held against her chest. You are early, she said. The man turned. His gaze moved from her face to the linen cloth in her hand, then to the thin cut across its edge. Something cold entered his expression. You should not have noticed that, he said. Clara's fingers tightened around the cloak. Beyond the closed doors, the first ceremonial bell began to ring. The man smiled without warmth. Then 4 more bearers entered the hall behind him. The 5 men did not know how to carry ceremonial blades. Clara recognized it within seconds. A true bearer supported the weapon with both hands, palms open beneath the flat metal, displaying trust and submission before the throne. These men gripped the oak stands too firmly. Their thumbs rested near the guards. Their shoulders remained loose, their weight balanced across the balls of their feet. They were not preparing for a ceremony. They were preparing to move. The first man watched Clara until Mrs. Whitmore entered through the eastern arch. Then his expression emptied. Place the blades beside the territorial banners, the steward ordered. And do not scratch the floor. The 5 men obeyed. Poorly. One lifted his stand before the others, breaking the traditional order. Another turned his back toward the throne, something no trained palace servant would have dared. The man nearest the western pillar used 2 fingers to signal behind his leg. Wait. The others adjusted their positions. Clara felt the old lessons return through her body before memory gave them names. 5 points. 1 center. No clear retreat. Her father had once drawn the formation in charcoal across their kitchen table. 5 gates. A hunting pattern designed to make one powerful target believe every direction remained open until all 5 closed at once. Clara carried the royal cloak toward the council chamber. She did not run. Running made people look. A maid survived by becoming part of the wall until the wall needed to speak. Beta Marcus Reed stood outside the chamber with 2 guards. He was a broad man in dark armor, silver beginning at his temples, one hand resting near the sword at his hip. Clara stopped several feet away. My lord. Marcus looked at her folded cloak. The king is waiting. The ceremonial bearers have been changed. His gaze sharpened slightly. Changed by whom? I do not know, but they are not palace servants. Lord Victor Ashford appeared before Marcus could answer. He wore white ceremonial robes edged in gold, every fold arranged with deliberate perfection. As master of ceremonies, he controlled the hall, the procession, and every person permitted to approach the throne. They were approved this morning, Victor said. Clara had not heard him approach. He held out a parchment bearing the royal seal. Marcus examined it. The mark appeared genuine. Clara looked past the paper toward Victor's hands. No ink stained his fingers, though the order had supposedly been written less than an hour earlier. The fifth blade has been sharpened, she said. Victor smiled patiently. Servants often mistake polishing for sharpening. It cut the linen without pressure. Then perhaps the maid handled it carelessly. Marcus returned the parchment. The order is valid. Clara lowered her voice. They stand in a 5 gates formation. For the first time, Victor's smile changed. Only slightly. Servants do not interpret military formations. Marcus studied Clara. Return to your duties. I will increase the guard at the western entrance. It was not enough, but it was all the authority he would give her. The council doors opened. Alpha King Ethan Blackwood stepped into the corridor. The space adjusted around him. Guards straightened. Victor bowed. Even Marcus moved half a step aside. Ethan was tall and powerfully built, dressed in black leather beneath a silver-threaded tunic. His dark hair had been swept back from a face made severe by control rather than cruelty. Clara approached with the cloak. As she fastened the silver clasp at his throat, she felt Victor watching. Ethan looked down at her steady hands. Clara leaned close enough to appear as though she were checking the embroidery. When the 5th bell rings, she whispered, "Do not reach for the ceremonial cup." His eyes met hers. "Why?" Victor called from the hall. "My king, the procession is ready." Clara stepped back before she could answer. Beyond the doors, 5 men lifted 5 blades, and the second bell began to ring. The third bell sounded as Ethan entered the great hall. The note rolled beneath the vaulted ceiling and faded into the stone. Clara moved behind the procession with the other servants, carrying a silver tray she had not been assigned. It gave her a reason to remain near the throne. More importantly, it gave her something reflective enough to watch the room without turning her head. The ceremony began. 5 territorial banners hung between the pillars. Beneath each stood one of the unfamiliar bearers, holding a ceremonial blade across both palms. They looked correct now. That was what made them more dangerous. They had adjusted their posture, opened their hands, lowered their eyes at the proper moments. Someone had taught them what Clara noticed. Ethan sat upon the black oak throne, one hand resting on the carved wolf at its arm. Marcus stood to his right. Victor remained below the platform, directing each stage of the ritual with small movements of his fingers. The first territory approached. Its alpha knelt. A bearer presented the blade. No attack came. The second territory repeated the oath. Still nothing. Clara watched the men through the polished tray. They were not looking at the speakers. They were measuring Ethan. One counted the distance between the throne and Marcus. Another tracked the guards along the western wall. The third shifted his right foot whenever Ethan moved his hand toward the ceremonial table. The cup waited there, dark silver, filled with spiced wine. Clara remembered the warning she had given him. Do not reach for it. Ethan had not asked again. He had not ordered her removed either. The third oath ended. Victor lifted one hand. A servant carried a bowl of smoking incense toward the throne. Clara smelled pine resin first, then something sharper. Silver. Her father had taught her that powdered silver did not need to shine to be dangerous. Mixed into smoke, it entered the lungs before a wolf understood weakness had begun. Clara stepped forward. A guard blocked her path. Back. The incense is wrong. His expression hardened. You were told to remain with the servants. Before she could answer, the smoke reached the platform. The nearest royal guard inhaled. His knees buckled. He struck the stone with one hand, tried to rise, and collapsed beside the throne. Marcus drew his sword halfway. The hall erupted into murmurs. Victor raised both hands. Remain calm. The guard has taken ill. Clara looked at Ethan. He had covered his mouth with the edge of his cloak. He had believed her. Not completely. Enough. Marcus kicked the incense bowl from the platform. Burning herbs scattered across the stone. Seal the doors, he ordered. The unfamiliar bearer nearest the western entrance moved before the guards did. He closed it. then placed his body in front of the lock. Marcus saw it. So did Ethan. For the first time, the Alpha King's gaze shifted from the ceremony to the 5 men. The 4th bell began to ring. Victor stepped closer to the throne with the ceremonial cup held in both hands. "My king," he said. "The ritual must continue." Ethan did not reach for it. Victor's eyes flicked toward Clara. That single glance confirmed everything. The 5th bearer adjusted his grip beneath the dull edge of his blade. Except it was not dull. Clara saw the candlelight run cleanly along its sharpened side. The 4th bell faded. The hall waited for the 5th. Clara lowered the tray. 3 guards were already weakened by the smoke. Marcus stood 2 steps too far from Ethan. The 5 men had begun to move inward. Not enough for anyone else to notice. Enough for her. Ethan looked directly at Clara. This time, he did not ask why. He asked only one question. How long? Clara listened to the mechanism above the hall preparing the final strike. "One breath," she whispered. The 5th bell began to fall. The 5th bell struck. The sound had not finished crossing the hall when the first silver chain flew. It wrapped around Ethan's right wrist and snapped tight against the carved arm of the throne. The second chain caught his left forearm. At the same moment, the ceremonial curtain dropped from the rafters, black velvet crashing between the platform and the royal guards. The hall vanished behind fabric, leaving Ethan inside a narrow circle with 5 armed men. The attack had taken less than 1 heartbeat. Clara dropped the silver tray. The nearest bearer turned toward her. That was his mistake. She seized the long ashwood staff supporting the western banner and pulled it free. The wolf emblem collapsed behind her as she stepped beneath the first blade. Metal struck wood. The impact shuddered through her arms. She did not try to overpower him. Strength was not the point. Her father's voice returned from years ago. A formation is strongest where every man expects the others to remain. Clara twisted the staff beneath the attacker's wrist and drove the end downward. His grip opened. The sharpened ceremonial blade struck the stone. The second man moved toward Ethan. Clara hooked the staff behind his ankle and dragged the ceremonial carpet sideways. His foot slipped. His shoulder struck the third attacker, forcing both men into the same narrow path. 5 gates required distance. She gave them none. Marcus tore through the fallen curtain from the opposite side, but 2 bearers blocked him with crossed blades. "Left gate," Clara shouted. Marcus froze for only an instant. Then recognition entered his face. He changed stance, stepped inside the nearer man's reach, and struck the attacker's elbow with the pommel of his sword. The formation bent. Ethan pulled against the chains. Silver smoke still weakened him, but weakness was not helplessness. The muscles across his shoulders tightened beneath black leather. The thrown arm cracked where the right chain had been anchored. The 5th attacker raised the sharpened blade. He aimed for Ethan's throat. Clara saw the angle. Too high for a killing strike against a standing man. Perfect for a king bound to a throne. She moved. The staff met the blade inches from Ethan's neck. Wood split. The broken end spun from her hands. The attacker smiled. Then Clara wrapped one of the fallen territorial ribbons around his wrist and pulled across her body. His arm crossed his own chest. His blade turned away from Ethan. Ethan tore the broken, thrown arm free. The chain became a weapon in his hand. He struck the attacker across the forearm, sent the blade skidding across the floor, and rose. The balance of the room changed. Until that moment, 5 men had been containing a king. Now they were standing too close to him. Ethan drove one attacker into the stone pillar. Marcus disarmed another. Royal guards broke through the curtain and forced the remaining men to their knees. Then the hall became silent. A ribbon drifted slowly to the floor. The ceremonial blade continued spinning across the stone until it stopped at Clara's feet. She stood between Ethan and the fallen attackers, one half of the broken staff still clenched in her hand. Every noble in the great hall was staring at the maid. One of the captured men lifted his head. Blood darkened the corner of his mouth, but he was smiling. Not at Ethan. At her. "Thomas taught you well," he said. Clara's grip tightened. The name reached every corner of the hall. Marcus turned toward her. Ethan's expression changed. The attacker laughed once. Then he spoke the surname Clara had never used inside Blackwood Keep. "Hayes." The first chain placed on Clara's wrists belonged to the king. Not because Ethan ordered it. Because Lord Victor moved before anyone else understood what the captured attacker had said. "Seize her," he commanded. 2 guards stepped forward. Clara did not resist. The broken staff remained in her hand until Marcus took it from her carefully, his eyes fixed on her face as though searching for the daughter inside the name he had just heard. Hayes. The surname moved through the hall in whispers. Thomas Hayes had once trained the Royal Guard. He had also died branded as a traitor. Victor crossed the ruined ceremonial platform, white robes untouched except for a line of silver dust along one sleeve. A maid who recognizes a forbidden formation, he said. A maid who knows how to break it. A maid addressed by name by one of the assassins. His gaze swept across the nobles. Does anyone still believe this was chance? Clara looked toward Ethan. The Alpha King stood beside the shattered throne, one wrist reddened where the silver chain had burned his skin. He said nothing. That silence hurt more than accusation. Victor gestured toward Clara's apron. Search her. A female attendant approached and emptied the pockets onto the stone. A spool of thread. A ring of servants' keys. A folded map of the Great Hall. A black iron badge marked with the symbol of the old rebellion. Clara stared at it. That is not mine. Victor lifted the badge between two fingers. Of course. The map was opened next. 5 positions had been marked around the throne. The exact places where the attackers had stood. Murmurs rose through the court. I drew the servant routes, Clara said, for carrying linens during the ceremony. And the 5 marks. They were not there. Victor smiled. A convenient answer. The guards closed the shackles around her wrists. Ethan moved then. 1 step. The hall fell quiet. Remove them. Victor turned. My king. She had a clear path to my throat. Ethan's voice remained low. She used it to stop the blade. Victor's expression tightened. That may have been part of the performance. Ethan descended from the damaged platform and stopped in front of Clara. His eyes moved over the iron badge, the marked map, and the chains around her wrists. Then he looked directly at her. You saved my life, he said. That does not yet tell me who you are. Clara held his gaze. It tells you who I chose not to let die. For one breath, something changed in his face. Not trust. Not yet. But recognition. Ethan unlocked the shackles himself. She will be held under guard in the western chamber, he announced. No one questions her without my permission. No one touches her. Victor bowed. Too easily. Clara was escorted from the hall, while servants gathered the fallen ribbons and guards dragged the surviving assassins toward the lower cells. As she passed the first prisoner, he leaned close enough for only her to hear. The cup was never the weapon. Before Clara could answer, a guard pulled him away. That night, she sat behind a locked door with 2 soldiers outside and Thomas Hayes's name alive again inside the castle that had condemned him. Near midnight, footsteps pounded through the corridor. Marcus entered without knocking. His face had gone pale. The prisoner who knew your father, he said, is dead. Clara stood. How? Marcus looked toward the barred window. Someone entered a sealed cell, cut his throat, and left without opening the door. From somewhere deep beneath the castle, a single alarm bell began to ring. The dead man had swallowed no poison. Clara knew that before the healer finished examining him. She stood outside the lower cell with Ethan and Marcus while guards searched the corridor for a door that had never opened. The prisoner lay beneath a wool covering. No weapon remained inside. No footprints marked the dust beyond those belonging to the guards. Yet the man was dead. Not by magic. By preparation. The wound was made from inside the cell, Marcus said. Clara looked at the iron bars. One had been polished near the lower hinge. She crouched. A thin wire had been threaded through the stone, almost invisible in the torchlight. Someone outside the wall had pulled it tight at the exact height of the prisoner's throat. He was positioned before we brought him here, she said. Ethan turned toward her. You saw that from the wire? From the chair. The prisoner's chair had been bolted to the floor directly beneath the hidden line. This cell had not been chosen after the attack. It had been prepared before the ceremony. Marcus stared at her for a long moment. Thomas Hayes taught you more than formations. Clara rose. He taught me that assassinations begin long before a blade is drawn. Silence settled between them. Then Ethan ordered the guards away. Only Marcus remained. Tell me everything, the king said. Clara looked toward the covered body. My father trained the Royal Guard for 19 years. He taught them how to fight, but he spent more time teaching them how to prevent a fight. Marcus's expression shifted. I trained under him. I know. The admission surprised him. You were the only student he believed would question an order. Marcus looked away. He was wrong. 12 years earlier, Thomas had discovered guards practicing the Five Gates formation beneath the western tower. When he reported it, Lord Victor produced forged letters claiming Thomas intended to use the formation against the crown. Thomas was arrested. Clara was 17 when he died in exile. I entered the keep to find the original training records, she said. Not to kill anyone, not to reclaim his title. I wanted proof. Ethan studied her. And today I saw 5 men repeat the formation that condemned him. A healer entered carrying the ceremonial recovery vial. My king, the silver exposure may worsen during the night. You should drink this. Clara's eyes moved to the bottle. Dark glass, black wax, prepared before the ceremony. The dead prisoner's final words returned. The cup was never the weapon. Clara crossed the room and struck the vial from the healer's hand. It shattered across the stone. The liquid hissed where it touched the torch ash. Marcus drew his sword. The healer backed away in terror. Ethan did not move. What was in it, he asked. Clara knelt beside the fragments. A bitter smell rose through the pine-scented corridor. Foxglove. Not enough to kill immediately. Enough to slow the heart of a wolf already weakened by silver. The attack had never depended on 5 men escaping. They only needed Ethan injured, weakened, forced to accept treatment prepared by someone inside the palace. Clara looked up. The ceremony was designed to fail. Marcus frowned. They intended the assassins to lose. After they wounded him, Ethan's face became still. If I drank that, you would appear to survive the attack. Clara looked toward the shattered vial. Then you would die before morning. From the staircase above came the sound of servants carrying folded black cloth. Funeral cloth. Prepared 3 days early. The funeral cloth had been cut to the exact length of the throne. Clara knew because she had measured that platform herself 3 days earlier. Servants carried the black fabric through the upper corridor in folded lengths. Their faces pale, their steps hurried. None of them looked toward Ethan. None seemed surprised to find the king standing alive beside the shattered recovery vial. Marcus stopped the first servant. Who ordered this? The young man swallowed. Lord Victor's office. When, 3 days ago, the corridor became very still. Ethan took one length of cloth from the servant's arms. Black wool, silver edging. The crowned wolf stitched upside down, as tradition required only after a king's death. Victor had not prepared for the possibility of mourning. He had prepared for certainty. Clara followed the servants toward the lower ceremonial chambers. There, beneath the western stair, they found 6 mourning banners, a sealed proclamation announcing Ethan's death, and a black carriage waiting behind the iron gates. The horses were already harnessed. On the carriage door, fresh wax carried the seal of the council. Marcus broke the lock. Inside lay a second crown, smaller than Ethan's, made for another head. The heir, Marcus said. No, Clara replied. She examined the inner lining. The measurements were wrong for a child. The circlet had been shaped for a grown man. Someone had already been chosen to replace Ethan. A folded document rested beneath the crown. It named Lord Victor Ashford as protector of the 5 territories until the council selected a permanent ruler. The decision had been written before the attack, before the silver smoke, before the first chain left a bearer's hand. Ethan read the document without expression. That frightened the servants more than rage would have. What does Victor believe now? Clara asked. Marcus looked toward the broken vial. That the king has not taken the medicine. Then he will know the plan failed. Clara touched the black wax still clinging to the glass fragments. Unless he believes Ethan drank it before the vial broke. Ethan understood first. You want him to think I am dying. I want him to believe the throne is empty enough to approach. Marcus shook his head. He will not come without guards. He will come with whoever expects to wear that crown. They moved Ethan to the royal chamber before midnight. The shutters were closed. The hearth was lowered. He lay beneath heavy blankets while a healer loyal to Marcus spread word that the silver exposure had weakened his heart. Clara remained near the bed dressed in her maid's gray linen, her hands folded as though she had returned to being harmless. Outside, bells began tolling slowly. Not the death bell. Not yet. A warning that the king's condition had worsened. Footsteps gathered beyond the door. Victor entered carrying the replacement crown. Beside him walked 3 council lords and a man Clara had never seen before, dressed in the white mantle of the Southern Territories. Victor looked toward Ethan's still body. Then he smiled. Remove the maid, he said. She has already served her purpose. Clara lowered her eyes. Not in obedience. To hide the fact that Ethan's hand had just closed around the dagger beneath the blankets. Victor did not approach the bed immediately. He placed the replacement crown on the table beside Ethan's untouched cup and studied the room with the patience of a man who had already imagined every detail of victory. The Southern Lord remained near the door. The three councilmen spread themselves along the walls. Not guards. Witnesses. Victor wanted powerful men present when the kingdom changed hands. "The silver has done its work?" he asked. Clara kept her eyes lowered. The healer said his heart is failing. Victor looked at Ethan's motionless body. No healer understands royal blood as well as fear does. One councilman shifted uneasily. Victor noticed. "Do not lose your courage now. By sunrise, 5 territories will believe assassins from rival packs murdered their king. Grief will become anger. Anger will become war. And war will make them grateful for anyone capable of restoring order." The Southern Lord touched the crown. "And when the fighting ends?" Victor smiled. "You will sit beneath this." Clara felt Ethan's grip tighten around the hidden dagger. Victor walked toward the bed. 12 years, he said quietly. "That is how long I have waited to finish what Thomas Hayes interrupted." Clara raised her face. Victor looked at her. There was satisfaction in his eyes now. "Your father was offered a place beside me. All he had to do was train 5 loyal men to close around a king. He refused. He mistook loyalty for morality. You forged the letters. I forged what the council needed to believe." The words entered the room without resistance. Marcus and 6 royal guards waited behind the concealed door in the adjoining chamber. Every confession was being heard. Victor reached beneath his ceremonial robe and removed a narrow blade. Thomas died because he would not understand that kingdoms are not ruled by good men. They are ruled by men willing to decide which truths survive. Clara did not step back. Victor's eyes narrowed. "You have his worst habit." "What habit?" "Believing that seeing the blade means you can stop it." He lunged. Clara moved one step to the side. Nothing more. Victor's blade passed through the space where her throat had been. Ethan rose from the bed. The blankets fell away. His hand closed around Victor's wrist before the second strike began. Bone struck wood as Ethan drove him against the bedpost. The knife dropped. The replacement crown rolled from the table and hit the floor. The concealed door opened. Marcus entered with the royal guard. The Southern Lord reached for his sword, but 6 blades surrounded him before his hand touched the hilt. The councilmen raised their hands. Victor struggled once. Ethan tightened his grip. "You prepared my funeral before I was dead." Victor looked at Clara. She prepared it. The moment her father taught her to interfere. Marcus searched Victor's robe. Inside the inner pocket, he found a sealed order yellowed by age. The execution warrant for Thomas Hayes. Clara recognized her father's name before Marcus unfolded it. The royal seal at the bottom was false. The impression had been pressed from the same damaged mold used on the forged guard transfers. Marcus handed the order to Ethan. The Alpha King read it in silence. Then he gave it to Clara. Her hands trembled when she touched the page. For 12 years, her father's guilt had existed in ink. Now the lie carried the mark of the man who created it. Victor was forced to his knees. Ethan stood above him. "You tried to bury Thomas Hayes as a traitor." His voice remained calm. "Tomorrow, this kingdom will hear his name cleared before the same council that condemned him." Victor's face finally changed. Not anger. Fear. Clara folded the execution order carefully. She had entered Blackwood, keep believing she needed to become invisible long enough to find the truth. Instead, the truth now stood in the center of the royal chamber, surrounded by witnesses. And for the first time, Victor Ashford had nowhere left to hide. The judgment began with 5 blades. They lay upon the black oak table beneath the throne, polished until the torchlight ran cleanly along their edges. 4 pointed outward toward the walls, as tradition required. The 5th faced the king. No one had corrected it. By Ethan's order, it remained exactly as Clara had found it. The great hall was full before sunrise. Council lords stood beneath the territorial banners. Royal guards lined the pillars. Servants gathered near the western wall, occupying the same narrow strip of stone where Clara had spent 3 years learning how to disappear. Victor Ashford knelt in chains before them all. The Southern Lord and 3 councilmen stood under guard beside him. The surviving attackers had confessed before dawn. Their statements, the forged transfer orders, the the poisoned recovery vial, the prepared funeral proclamation, and Thomas Hayes's false execution warrant rested on the evidence table. Marcus Reed stood beside Clara. He had once trained under her father. Now he carried Thomas Hayes's old staff across both palms. Ethan entered without ceremony. The hall changed around him. Conversations died. Shoulders straightened. Even Victor lifted his head. The Alpha King wore black leather beneath a silver mantle. A red mark remained around one wrist where the chain had burned him, but he walked without weakness. He stopped beside the fifth blade. "For 12 years," he said. This court remembered Thomas Hayes as a traitor. Clara felt every face turned toward her. Ethan lifted the false warrant. The seal on this order was forged. The testimony used against him was purchased. The formation he was accused of creating was designed by the men who condemned him. Victor's chains shifted. "You cannot rewrite history because a maid fought well." Ethan looked at him. No, his voice remained calm. "History is rewritten when powerful men are permitted to lie without challenge. Today we correct it." Marcus placed Thomas's staff on the table. Then he lowered himself to one knee before Clara. The movement sent a shock through the hall. "I was his student," Marcus said. "And when he was accused, I obeyed the men above me instead of questioning the lie before me." Clara looked down at him. Marcus's jaw tightened. "I cannot return what was taken from him. But before this court, I acknowledge Thomas Hayes as the finest weapons master the Royal Guard ever served." One by one, the older guards placed their fists over their hearts. Clara's throat tightened. She had imagined this moment for years. In every version, she had believed vindication would feel like triumph. Instead, it felt quiet, heavy, like opening a door and finding the room behind it empty because the person who deserved to enter could no longer return. Ethan understood. He did not ask her to smile. Victor was stripped of title, land, and council authority. The Southern conspirator was imprisoned. The 3 councilmen who had agreed to recognize the replacement crown were removed from office and placed under investigation. When the guards raised Victor to his feet, he looked toward Clara. "You believe this makes you important?" Clara met his eyes. "No." She glanced at the servants along the wall. "It makes it harder for men like you to make us invisible." Victor was taken away. The fifth blade remained. Lord Harrington, the eldest councilman not implicated in the plot, stepped forward. "What position is to be given to the maid?" The words sounded polite. The dismissal beneath them did not. Ethan descended from the throne. "Her name is Clara Hayes." He crossed the hall and stopped beside her. 5 trained killers stood between me and this court. Clara understood their formation before my guards knew a battle had begun. His gaze moved across the gathered nobles. She recognized the poisoned smoke. She refused the recovery vial that would have killed me. She found a funeral prepared before my death and exposed the man who intended to inherit the kingdom through war. Ethan looked at the fifth blade. She changed everything before the first sword reached me. No one spoke. He lifted a black and silver clasp from the table. The emblem showed the Blackwood wolf above 2 cross staffs. "I offer Clara Hayes the position of Royal Defense Strategist, with authority to inspect every ceremony, guard rotation, weapon, and royal chamber in this keep." A murmur passed through the hall. Ethan did not fasten the clasp to her dress. He held it out. "A choice. Will you remain?" he asked. Clara looked toward the servants. Mrs. Whitmore stood among them, her keys silent against her skirt. A young maid beside her watched Clara with wide eyes, as though seeing for the first time that someone from the wall could be called into the center of the room. Clara took the clasp. "Only if every servant is permitted to report danger without first proving they deserve to be heard." Ethan answered immediately. "Done." That afternoon, the law was written. No warning shall be dismissed because of the rank of the one who gives it. The fifth blade was never removed from the hall. It remained facing the throne, not as a threat, as a reminder. They had believed Clara carried banners. She had understood how armies moved. And the Alpha King lived because the maid saw the attack before the first blade fell. The first order Clara gave as royal defense strategist was to move the servants away from the walls. No one understood at first. The Great Hall had always been arranged the same way. Nobles occupied the center. Guards stood near the pillars. Servants remained along the stone edges, close enough to be summoned and far enough to be forgotten. Clara changed that before the next council meeting. She placed 2 small tables near the northern arch and assigned 4 maids to record observations during every royal gathering. Mrs. Whitmore stared at the arrangement. You want servants taking notes? I want them writing down anything that does not belong. A misplaced cup? Yes. A stranger wearing the wrong colors? Yes. A guard standing where he was not assigned? Clara looked toward the fifth blade still facing the throne. Especially that. The new system made the council uncomfortable. That was not a reason to stop. For 3 weeks, Clara inspected corridors, cellar doors, guard schedules, ceremonial stores, and every route leading to Ethan's chambers. She discovered no assassins. She found 12 broken locks, 2 falsified supply records, a servant stair blocked by old furniture, and 1 captain who had ignored reports of silver dust near the Western Armory. He was dismissed before sunset. Ethan attended every review. He did not interfere. That surprised her. Kings were accustomed to giving orders. Ethan listened while Clara questioned blacksmiths, kitchen girls, guards, stable boys, and chambermaids. He never asked why she took the testimony of a laundress as seriously as that of a council lord. He had learned why. One evening, Clara found him alone in the training hall. The windows were open to the cold. Moonlight stretched across the floor. Ethan stood near the weapon rack wearing a plain black tunic, the red mark from the silver chain still faint around his wrist. Thomas Hayes's staff rested in his hands. You are holding it incorrectly, Clara said. Ethan looked toward her. Most men would have straightened or defended themselves. He only asked how. Clara crossed the hall. Your grip is too tight. It is a weapon. It is also wood. If you fight it, it will fight you. She placed one hand over his and adjusted his fingers. The staff shifted between them. Ethan watched her, not the weapon. Clara noticed. She stepped back. He did not. Marcus told me your father used this hall, Ethan said. He trained here before I was born. And you? In a kitchen. A faint smile touched his mouth. That explains the flower marks on the old practice drawings. Clara looked at him sharply. You found those. I had Thomas's belongings brought from the Royal Archive. Her breath caught. Ethan walked to a bench and lifted a worn leather case. Inside lay charcoal sketches, training notes, and a small wooden whistle Clara had not seen since she was 17. She picked it up carefully. For years, she had imagined her father's possessions destroyed. You kept them, she whispered. They should never have been taken from you. The words entered the quiet hall and remained there. Clara closed the case. Thank you. Ethan's gaze held hers. You saved my life. That debt has already been acknowledged. This is not a debt. His voice lowered. It is an apology from a crown that failed your family. Clara looked at the old staff between them, then at the man who had offered her authority without demanding obedience. You are not the crown tonight, she said. No, then who are you? Ethan stepped closer. A man asking whether you will teach him what your father taught you. Clara studied his stance. His shoulders were strong. His balance was good. His pride, perhaps, still required work. She placed the staff back in his hands. Loosen your grip. This time he obeyed. Outside, the castle bells marked midnight. Inside the training hall, the Alpha King learned from the maid who had saved him. And for the first time, Clara did not feel as though she were continuing her father's unfinished work alone. The first time Ethan told Clara he loved her, she had just disarmed him. The staff struck the stone floor and rolled beneath the training bench. Ethan looked at his empty hands. Clara lowered her own weapon. You tightened your grip again. You moved before I saw you. That was the lesson. Winter rain tapped against the high windows of the training hall. The braziers had burned low, leaving the room scented with ash, leather, and cold stone. They had trained together for nearly 3 months, usually after the council chambers emptied and the castle became quiet enough for Ethan to exist without an audience. He had improved. He no longer relied entirely on strength. He listened with his body. He noticed changes in balance, breath, and distance. But when frustrated, he still tried to overpower the staff. Clara crossed the floor and retrieved his weapon. You cannot command wood to move correctly. I command armies. Armies complain less. A laugh escaped him. It was brief, unexpected, and unguarded. Clara turned toward him. The Alpha King rarely laughed where anyone could hear. His smiles were usually small things, offered at the edge of conversation and withdrawn before others could decide they had seen them. This one remained. Then the alarm bell rang. Once, Clara's staff was in her hand before the second strike. Ethan reached for the sword he had left near the wall. The training hall door opened, and a young laundry maid stumbled inside. breathless and pale. "My king," the Eastern stare. Ethan stopped. The girl lowered her eyes immediately. "I am sorry. I should have told a guard first." Clara approached her. "What did you see?" The iron door was open, the one below the archive. The maid twisted wet linen between her fingers, and there were muddy footprints, but no rain reaches that corridor. Ethan looked at Clara. 3 months earlier, the girl might have been dismissed for interrupting him. Now the castle moved because she had spoken. Within minutes, guards sealed the archive. A council clerk was discovered inside with stolen border maps hidden beneath his cloak. He had planned to sell them before dawn. No blood was shed. No blade reached the king. The danger ended because a servant noticed mud where mud did not belong. Later, Ethan found Clara beneath the eastern arch, watching the laundry maid receive a formal commendation from Marcus. "You changed this place," he said. Clara shook her head. "I gave them permission to use what they already saw. That is what changed it." They stood beside one another as rain moved beyond the courtyard. Ethan's hand closed around the silver-burned wrist the assassins had chained months earlier. The scar had faded. The memory had not. "I spent years believing safety came from strength," he said. "More guards. Higher walls. Sharper swords." Clara looked at him. "And now I know it also comes from listening." His eyes held hers. "And from one woman who refused to let me die, even when I had given her no reason to trust me. You believed my warning. Too late. But you believed it." Ethan stepped closer. There was no throne behind him. No council waiting for a royal decision. Only the man she had taught to loosen his grip and the woman he had taught she no longer needed to disappear. "I notice when you leave a room," he said. Clara became still. "The castle feels louder without you. The council becomes less honest. And for once, words failed him." Clara waited. He had given her that gift many times. Now she returned it. Ethan took her hand. "I love you." The confession was quiet. No bell marked it. No ceremony gave it authority. It was simply true. Clara looked down at their joined hands. "You still need work on your stance." His mouth curved. "That is not an answer." She lifted her eyes. "I know." Then she stepped closer and kissed him. Outside, the rain continued against Blackwood Keep. Inside, for the first time, neither of them was standing alone. The crown was not the first thing Ethan offered Clara. He offered her the choice to refuse it. They stood alone in the western gallery before sunrise, 6 months after the ceremony of 5 blades and 3 months after the night she kissed him beneath the eastern arch below them. Blackwood Keep prepared for a royal wedding. Servants carried white flowers through the courtyard. Guards polished silver armor. Musicians tuned their instruments behind the great hall doors. Every corridor smelled of beeswax, pine, and bread baking for hundreds of guests. Clara wore a pale blue gown with silver thread at the cuffs. Her father's black and silver clasp rested at her shoulder. Ethan stood before her in ceremonial black, broad-shouldered and severe enough to make the crown in his hands seem almost unnecessary. "Almost. You may still say no," he said. Clara looked at the silver circlet. "To marrying you?" "To all of it." He gestured toward the hall beyond the doors. "The title, the council, the attention. A life where every mistake becomes public and every kindness is examined for weakness." Clara studied him. "You make queenship sound unpleasant." "It often is. And being married to you." His expression softened. "I am told I tighten my grip when frustrated." "You do." "I am improving." Slowly, the corner of his mouth moved. Then his face became serious again. "I love you. That does not give me the right to decide what your life should become." Clara looked through the gallery window. Servants crossed the courtyard below, no longer pressed against the walls when nobles passed. 2 young maids carried writing boards used to record security observations. A kitchen boy stopped a guard to report an unlocked gate. The guard listened. That was the kingdom Clara had begun to build. Not from a throne. From permission. "If I refuse the crown," she said, "will I remain royal defense strategist?" "Yes." "Will servants still have the right to report danger directly?" "Yes." "Will I still be allowed to correct your stance?" Ethan glanced at her. That condition was not mentioned in the marriage agreement. It should have been. Clara placed one hand over the crown. "I do not want it because it makes me powerful." "Then why accept it?" "Because power already fills that room." She looked toward the great hall. "And someone should remember what it feels like to stand outside it." The wedding began at noon. 5 ceremonial blades rested beneath the territorial banners. for faced outward. The fifth still pointed toward the throne. No one attempted to correct it. Marcus stood beside Clara as she entered the hall, carrying Thomas Hayes's restored staff across both palms. The royal guard lowered their swords in salute. Mrs. Whitmore stood among the servants. This time, none of them lowered their eyes. Ethan waited at the foot of the throne rather than upon it. He came down to meet Clara. The high priest raised the silver marriage clasp. "Clara Hayes," he said, "do you choose Ethan Blackwood as your husband?" Clara looked at Ethan. Not the Alpha King. The man who had listened when listening endangered him. The man who had returned her father's belongings. The man who had learned that strength did not require gripping everything until it broke. "I choose him." The priest turned. "Ethan Blackwood, do you choose Clara Hayes as your wife?" Ethan took her hands. "I chose her before I understood that was what I was doing." Soft laughter moved through the hall. Clara smiled. "That is not the traditional answer. I have had poor experiences with tradition." The priest fastened the clasp at Clara's shoulder. Then Ethan lifted the crown. Before he placed it upon her head, he spoke quietly enough that only she could hear. "This will not make you worthy." Clara met his eyes. "No, you were worthy when no one in this hall knew your name." He lowered the crown. The entire court rose. Not only the nobles. The guards, servants, kitchen workers, stable hands, laundresses, and craftsmen rose with them. Clara turned toward the western wall. No servants stood there. They had been given places among the witnesses. Later, she issued her first order as queen. The fifth blade would remain facing the throne forever. Beneath it, words were carved into black oak. "Power is safest when the lowest voice may question it." Years later, children would ask why one blade pointed toward the king. They would be told about 5 assassins, a poison vial, and a maid who understood the attack before the first sword fell. But Ethan always told the story differently. He said Clara had not changed everything because she knew how to fight. She changed everything because she knew how to see. And because when the entire kingdom expected her to remain silent, she chose to speak. The next warning came from a maid carrying ashes. Her name was Lily Warren. She was 17, newly assigned to the royal chambers, and still moved through Blackwood Keep as though every stone corridor might reject her presence. She walked close to the walls. She apologized before anyone blamed her. She lowered her eyes whenever a council lord passed. Clara recognized every habit. 10 years had passed since the ceremony of 5 blades. 10 years since Victor Ashford prepared a funeral for a king who had not yet died. The 5th ceremonial blade still faced the throne. The law beneath it had darkened with age, but the words remained clear. Power is safest when the lowest voice may question it. Lily found Clara in the Western Gallery on the morning of the Northern Alliance ceremony. The Queen stood beside Ethan, reviewing the guard positions below. Silver now touched the Alpha King's dark hair at the temples, though time had done little to diminish the breadth of his shoulders or the controlled authority of his presence. Lily stopped at the doorway. Ash trembled inside the small copper bucket she carried. Clara turned. "What did you notice?" The girl's eyes widened. "I did not say anything, Your Majesty. You came here instead of returning to the hearth." Lily swallowed. "The ashes are wrong." A council secretary sighed impatiently. "They are ashes." Clara raised one hand. The man fell silent. Lily stepped forward. The wood burned blue near the eastern brazier, and there were small pieces of white metal beneath it. Ethan's expression changed. "Silver? I think so." The eastern brazier stood beside the entrance reserved for visiting alphas. If powdered silver had been mixed into the ceremonial fire, the smoke would weaken every wolf who entered the hall. Clara ordered the doors sealed. Marcus Reed, older now but still commanding the royal guard, inspected the brazier himself. Beneath the charcoal lay 3 thin silver capsules designed to split when the fire reached full heat. The guards arrested a visiting servant before the ceremony began. Inside his sleeve, they found a map marking the places where each Northern Alpha would stand. No one was harmed. No blade was drawn. The alliance continued after the contaminated brazier had been removed. That evening, Lily stood before the council. Her hands shook, but she did not lower her eyes. Lord Harrington's son studied her with the same polite contempt his father had once shown Clara. "She is only a chambermaid." Ethan looked toward Clara. He did not answer. He no longer needed to. Clara descended from the throne and stopped before Lily. "What made you inspect the ashes?" "My mother worked in a forge," Lily said. She taught me that different metals change the color of fire. Clara smiled. A useful skill. No one has ever called it that. They will now. She appointed Lily to the royal inspection staff and ordered that every servant be trained to report unfamiliar smells, sounds, objects, and changes in flame. After the council dispersed, Ethan found Clara beneath the 5 ceremonial blades. You knew she had seen something before she spoke, he said. I knew what fear looks like when it is trying to become courage. Ethan took her hand. Above them, 4 blades faced the walls. The 5th faced the throne. Not because kings should live in fear. Because power should never forget where danger could come from. Or who might see it first. Clara looked across the hall at Lily, now explaining blue flame to 2 senior guards who listened without interruption. Years earlier, a maid had changed everything because she understood how armies moved. Now another servant had saved the kingdom with a bucket of ashes. The victory was not that Clara had risen from the wall to the throne. It was that no one in Blackwood Keep had to become queen before their warning mattered.